everybody. I'm Julia DiLiberti. I teach humanities at the College of DuPage. I'm also the Global Education Liaison. And I'm here today with Shannon Brown, who is a professor of education at the College of DuPage. 6 years, Shannon?
6 years.
And prior to that, you were a principal, a science teacher. Anything I'm missing?
That's good.
Shannon's a parent of children as well, so she's coming to us with a higher ed and K-12 perspective on education. I'm also with Ada Wainwright, professor of psychology, who's been at COD 17 years, Ada?
18. About 18, yeah.
18. Ada is also a parent with teenagers, so she also has a parent. Shannon and Ada both have parent perspective on the school system too. But we're here to talk about COVID as a disease, COVID as it affects education, and some of the effects such as anxiety, uncertainty, social isolation. So we want to talk about how to navigate some of those effects and just things that relate to how parents and students can, parents and students in any situation, parents and students, whatever, whether we're in school, whether we're e-learning, whether we're going back and forth, how can we negotiate or navigate these things? And I was talking with Ada and Shannon beforehand, and they both had some ideas that I think I would love it if they would share with us. So Shannon, how are we gonna, first tip you want right out the gate, what do you want to tell us? And then Ada, you can jump in as relevant.
So I think that going into the school year, I think that we definitely need to be prepared to teach our kids the new norms. We're going to need to teach our kids that we're going to need to social distance in the classroom, that we may be divided by plexiglass, that it's probably going to be the expectation that we're wearing masks inside the class. So wearing masks at home right now, especially with the little ones, starting to wear masks at home, practicing and progressively wearing masks at home a little longer each day. As parents, wearing the masks with our children at home to show that this is the norm, and embracing wearing masks and not
Should
fighting.
we be doing that all day, Shannon, or at a specific time, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think progressively starting off a little bit at a time and wearing them longer and longer and longer. Because if the expectation is that we're wearing them 4, 5, 6+ hours a day, then you're going to want to wear them 4, 5, 6+ hours a day at home. You know, it's not going to be okay to wear them just for half an hour or an hour or 2 hours a day if you're going to send your 5 or 6 or 7-year-old child to school 2 or 3 days a week and they're going to be wearing them 5+ hours a day consecutively. Then they're going to need to be used to wearing the mask for that long of a period of time consecutively. So if you're expecting to send your child to school wearing them for more than 5 hours a day, then you're going to want to get them used to wearing them for more than 5 hours a day.
So I think before the talk, you said we should build up to that gradually, like for 5 minutes at first, and then for 1 week we do up to 15 minutes, and the next week we try half an hour, and then we build up that time.
And I think one of the things to recognize is that there are so many masks out there as well. And so trying to find a mask that is comfortable for your child is really important. And there's all kinds of techniques about how to tighten them or loosen them. So I think that those masks are probably one of the most key elements right now. We know that that's going to play a part in our educational system, right? That they're going to be wearing masks, and making sure that they're ready to wear those is really incredibly important.
So setting up the behavior, modeling the behavior. What do you guys want to tell us next, Ada or Shannon?
Sure.
Okay.
I think motivation is a big part of this as well. I think that when you go to school, when you're in your classes, there's education and there's socialization, right? And so we know that there's going to be a little bit less socialization, and I think we have to really think about how we keep them motivated and on task in education. And so teachers do this all the time. This is part of education, and Shannon, you can talk about how teachers do those things. But teachers keep our students motivated. And if we know that some of the work that our children are doing is e-learning, we have had experience with that in the spring with our children, and it has been challenging. And so trying to recognize in our family how we can try to keep our kids motivated. So what would be some strategies, Shannon, maybe that teachers do that you know in education that they could try to transform and utilize in the classroom?
So most teachers use a PBIS model, positive behavior interventions and supports. They use sticker charts, they use treasure boxes, they use extra computer time in the classroom. Every single day, teachers use models to motivate students. I know Ada was talking earlier, dangling that carrot in front of the child to get them to turn in their work, get them to behave as expected in the classroom. So that the classroom runs more smoothly. Well, it's no different in the classroom as it is at home. If you want your child to do the things that you want them to do, to behave the way that you want them to behave, to turn in their work, to do the behaviors you're expecting, then dangle the carrot in front of them. So if you want them to do that, then you know your child better than anyone else knows your child. If they love video games, give them extra video game time. If they're really wanting something from their favorite store, then maybe they can work up to earning a gift certificate to their favorite store. Or maybe you have an ice cream sundae party or a pizza party, or spending time with them, bringing them to a park. Whatever it is that your child really loves to do or really wants to earn, make that the carrot that you dangle in front of them to get those assignments done, get their work turned in on time, do those behaviors that you're expecting of them. We as parents and we as employees of different companies, of schools, whatever, we have expectations that we have our work done at a certain time, and we need to do that. And their job as students is to turn their work in at a certain time. So have those carrots, motivate them to get that work done.
Two things, man. I am so happy you were not talking about literal carrots, because that would not motivate me. But then you mentioned this word expectations, and I know part of I think when we were talking before we started recording, and you had said something about, well, in the spring when we went to remote learning, it was communicated to students that their grade wasn't going to go any lower. So we were just trying to get through the grief and the stress and the what, but that, so maybe the expectation now is, it's e-learning, I don't have to do those things. So how would you guys, so I think you mentioned expectations and motivation. So we have some ways to motivate students, and there's probably more we can think of, but I mean, how do we set it up now so that students aren't expecting this to be a coasting sort of method of teaching and learning?
Sure. I think first of all, we probably need to set the expectation that things are going to change, that we might be in the classroom, we might be e-learning, we might go back and forth, we might be a combination of both. So I think we need to set those expectations as parents. And then in terms of setting expectations for students, I think that we need to let them know what we hope for them to gain in this year. So setting the expectations in the schedule of when you're going to do work and when the reward comes. I think that we want to be able to let students know that we expect them to behave in the ways that we have learned about social distancing, wearing the mask, keeping distance, which will be very hard. As I said, schools are education and socialization, but keeping that distance in the classroom, talking to our kids about those kinds of new norm kinds of behaviors. But then when we're talking about e-learning, I think a big part of it is setting that schedule and letting your kids know and your partner know, anyone who is going to be taking part or playing a part in your family in terms of educating and being with your children, what your expectations are. Setting that schedule, I think, is really important. You know, when do you complete different types of tasks, and making sure that every day is a day of learning. That's what they do in the school. And I think that in the spring, we just tried to get by, right? So I think that we want to make sure that we let them know that this isn't just finishing up with COVID. This is actually learning again. And I think that schools are more prepared for that. I know that many teachers, many school systems have met over the summer to talk about how they can incorporate e-learning with the face-to-face time, or just many are getting expectations of just doing e-learning, and some are hoping for full face-to-face. But whatever it is, I think we have to let our children know that this is a year of learning, that it's not just finish up the school year.
Shannon, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, as a parent, you're your child's first teacher. So if you're negative about what's going on, then your child's going to be negative about it as well. So if you're setting a positive atmosphere at home about e-learning and about the way that the school environment is set, then your child is going to be positive about it as well. The fact is that e-learning is going to happen regardless of if you want it to happen or not. Whether it's a hybrid approach to start the school year off, or whether there are COVID cases that happen in September or October or whenever, they're going to happen inevitably. So we need to be prepared for that. We need to be prepared as parents. We need to be prepared as students. We need to set up our homes to be prepared for that. We discussed earlier to set up systems, to set up support groups, whether they are with our current networks. We probably should be developing those support groups right now with people that we trust, with our current friends, our family members, our support groups, so that in the event that we go from some type of a hybrid model to a full e-learning model, we have some type of support group to help us if we as parents need to continue to go into work and we need somebody to take care of our children while they're still e-learning. So
I think,
go ahead.
no, I think earlier you had said too, or if everybody's in the same situation, you only have to take 1 week off to take care of everybody's kids, and then somebody else can take the following week off, so that not everybody's, So I guess I want to clarify, because we were talking about distancing and masking, and then this idea of bringing different families together. I'm like, wait, are we contradicting ourselves? But your point in starting to set that network up now is that if you say to people, we are going to be each other's support group, we're going to isolate so that we can come together without fear. Am I understanding that idea correctly?
Exactly. You're setting up a network of people with people you trust. You know their distancing practices. You know how their routines right now. You know whether they are going out all the time. You know whether they're masking right now or not. You know your comfortability level with them as it stands right now, and as it stands for the last 3-4 months as we've been quarantined. And you know whether you're comfortable leaving your children or taking their children into your house. And if you're comfortable with them, then they would be your support group. If not, then you find another support group.
Or, I like the idea too of starting that now, of saying to people, hey, do you want to be each other's commitment through the semester, at least to see how it goes?
I think that's one of the things that has been happening over the last couple of months, where you do start to see families merging. And when I say families, I can mean within your family or within friends, that they have started to do that, but we could start thinking more systematically about families that could be merging, that you trust, right? That could actually be a benefit in terms of childcare and e-learning, right? So I think all of those kinds of resources are really important. I also think it's really important to recognize who's in your home. So if your partner or older siblings can play a part in the educating of younger siblings, I think that they might actually like that role. And I know as a teacher, I learn best when I teach, right? So I never know a topic better than when I'm preparing a lecture on it. And so I think that having older siblings maybe work on math with, your fourth grader working with your first grader on math problems. I think that is a benefit to both of them, right? And then also, recognizing the hard work that they put in and motivating them. But I think that we need to really utilize all the resources that we have available, creating these bubbles and communities that we can support each other, but also recognizing what we have in our own homes. I think that those are really, really important things.
So within and outside, and I want to translate that too, because I learned from Shannon about accountability groups among students. So it's not just, so this translating your idea of using the family to rely on each other. If students could do this, if you can, even in e-learning, choose 2 or 3 people or be assigned a group of 4 people or however many people, so that you can contact them if you miss notes, if you have to miss a remote session one day, so that you can, talk over course ideas or catch up on the reading. I think that, Shannon, how do you use those accountability groups, correct, in class as well?
I do. I call them professional learning communities, and they are to report to each other, and they're responsible to each other. So if they miss class, they contact each other. They don't contact me. So it's really kind of the same.
And do you both think that can be translated to any age group?
I don't know that it can be translated to younger groups, that they can be responsible to each other, because I don't know that they can even be responsible for themselves.
I guess it would be more the parents than the kids that age, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely would. But I mean, even going back to some of those support groups, I think even some of the parents that are fearful of sending their kids into a hybrid-like environment, I think the support groups might even be beneficial to those parents that are fearful of sending their kids into a school environment, might be beneficial to the parents who solely want to do e-learning and want to do it and maybe can't do it because they have to go into work. Might be beneficial to parents who want to group together and do e-learning together, and maybe they have to go into work a few days a week and they can balance out and do e-learning. I do it Monday and Tuesday, you do it Wednesday and Thursday, and balance it out that way. Be creative with your schedules, to make it work so that you don't have to send your students into a building. And I understand it's only in a classroom of 12 students, but it's in a building still with hundreds of students.
Well, and faculty and support staff and bus drivers and custodial staff, et cetera. So far we've talked about like a tag team approach, setting expectations, offering carrots and rewards for motivation, getting that social network going. Ada, you had sort of talked about, Shannon, you also talked about modeling behavior, right? We have to model the social distancing. We have to model wearing the mask. We have to practice wearing the mask. Go ahead.
If you're going into a store and you're bringing your child, you need to model staying 6 feet away from another person so that your child is doing that. If your child is going near another person, you need to be cognizant of telling your child, no, we need to stay away from other people. You need to be cognizant of wearing a mask properly so that your child is wearing the mask properly, so that they're cognizant when they go into school next month, in a month from now, 7 weeks from now, that they are doing those same practices when they're entering the school, so that they're safe, and that they're safe for other students, and they're safe for the teachers who are 20, 30 plus years older than them and are at much greater risk than those children of developing COVID and much more risk of higher complications than the children are.
Ada, you had talked about uncertainty, and that uncertainty, what we have to understand is the constant is not change, but uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so how, you said that we should have a plan B and a plan C. And I know that plan B and plan C is going to be different for everybody, but that's maybe one way to navigate the constant of uncertainty. And I guess some of these other things are too, but do you want to add to that idea?
Sure. I think that we need to recognize that this is sort of a fluid time. that we're in the middle of the pandemic. We're definitely not at the end. And so what's true today isn't true tomorrow. So I think we really need to focus on what's the best thing that we can do today. And the best things that we can do, we've kind of talked about. We can model those kinds of behaviors. But I also think we have to have a looking forward, right? One of the things that was so challenging in my own home was finding our own personal workspace. I bet you lots of families could talk about that. How do you find the time for parents who are working home or out of home and the children to complete their work? And where were they physically completing this work, right? Was there a community area where everyone was studying? Was it private rooms? Were there offices for some people, and desks? And so I think that one of the plans that we could have right now is really thinking about when we do have a e-learning and maybe a greater amount of e-learning, where that's going to happen. And so thinking about breaking up the space, breaking up the time, the family, all of those kinds of things. I think that those are all plans that we should start thinking about. Also computers. Lots of people had struggles with technology and Wi-Fi, right? So having enough computers or iPads or Chromebooks, and then also having the Wi-Fi that would support it. And I think that if you were to talk to if you were to talk to your school, that you could try to maybe navigate some of that a little bit better and start planning for that. So I would think that that would be a significant part, other than just creating like these habits and recognizing how to motivate our children and creating expectations. I would also think about that learning space that we have. And so that would be a big part.
What you were saying about building a schedule, not only building a schedule, but when the space is going to be used. And particularly if you aren't in a position to own more than one computer or one cell phone that everyone's going to be sharing for. So who's going to get it when? I think that goes along really with your stuff about scheduling earlier.
Yeah, but I think we should plan for those things now. I think we just made do before, and now we know what worked and what didn't work.
We talk a lot about, or at least parents and pediatricians talk a lot about mental health, and I think one way to combat that is to make sure that we're trying to do what we were doing before as best as possible. Get up, get dressed, shower, brush your teeth. Don't stay in your pajamas. Don't let your kids stay in their pajamas all day long. And when you talk about motivation, celebrate the small things with your kids. You may not have celebrated 3 days of turning in your assignments all day long before, but when you're doing e-learning or hybrid learning all day long, that's not what we used to do. And if you go 2 weeks and your kids weren't turning in their assignments every single day, all day, and in 1 week you get 3 days where your kids turn in their assignments every single day, well, maybe you order pizza and you have a party. You put party hats on, you have a dance party in the kitchen, whatever it is, you celebrate the small things because it's not the same. So do things a little differently, because the new norm, it's a new norm. So you got to do things a little bit differently, and you have to celebrate the small things for yourself and for your kids.
Do students probably have some increased anxiety? Would you, as parents or as teachers? I mean, obviously you can't talk to a high schooler about the kind of anxiety he or she is having at the same level you're going to talk to a 4-year-old about that. So, but are those conversations coming up for you guys as parents? And then do you put your teacher hat on, or do you put your parent hat on?
I think both. I think you put your teacher hat on, your parent hat on, and your human being hat on. Your hat on as a person. And when your kid comes to you freaking out, you take their laptop or your tablet and you shut it, and you say, you know what? Take a half an hour, take an hour, go outside, go play, go on the swing set, turn on the radio, just chill out for an hour and go back to it, because that assignment's going to be there in an hour. Okay? You need to just relax. You need to just step away. You've been sitting there for 2 hours, and the assignment's going to be there in an hour. You don't need to sit there for another hour, because how many times have we been sitting at a computer, whether it's grading? We've been in ourselves in school for how long? In graduate school for how long? When we've been sitting at a computer writing a paper for how long? When we've just had to stand back and say enough is enough and go do something else. Well, we got to do the same thing for our kids, for our students, and say just walk away, go do something else, go take a walk, go do something else, and go back to it at another time. We have to put our human being hats on.
I like that, the human being hat. Ada, what would you add to that, or what would you add to in general?
Sure. I think some of the anxiety definitely is about getting the work completed and staying focused on the work. But I also think that part of it is being separate from your classmates and at a distance from your teachers. And so I think that as parents, one of the things that we can recognize is supporting our children to ask questions of their teachers, asking questions ourselves when our children maybe aren't prepared to ask them or don't quite know how to ask them. If we see that our child needs extra support, that we're the advocate for them. The teachers don't know that. They're at a distance as well. And so we will have to communicate that. So I think communicating that kind of stress and anxiety and the problems that our children might have, as the children get older, we can try to have them advocate for themselves and support and encourage them to do that. But when they're younger, we should definitely do those kinds of things. So I think when we think about focusing on the education part, that's a big part of it. But I also think, going back to not being in school really does leave our children at home completing work alone without peers. And I think we should support them in creating study groups with other peers, be it Zoom, that these aren't families that we have merged with, but looking for Zoom or FaceTime, or trust me, there's so many social media outlets that they use to communicate with. But I think that this is a point where we maybe say it's okay to be on your phone a little bit longer talking to kids than you normally would, but that is a motivator and that can work. And so, and if your child has a question, maybe they can ask a peer. They probably would in the classroom, right? And they can work together on problems and homework. So I think we should support that too. So I think when I think about some of that anxiety, to echo what Shannon's saying, it's about the pressure of getting the work done and understanding the work and taking a break, but communicating with your teachers and your peers. I think that's a huge part, and that will alleviate and take care of some of that anxiety as well.
So we're going to wrap it up. I just want to say that in general, I'm the Global Ed Liaison, and originally we were going to sort of talk about what people were doing in other countries and different practices, but I think that this discussion is far more useful, and we can talk about education systems in other countries and COVID in another chat. So I appreciate you guys being here. If you were running the conversation, if this were your own topic, are there things you would have said that we haven't touched on yet? Who wants to go first? Or what do you want to, how do you want to end, end your segment here?
Sure. I think as a developmental psychologist, I always like to think about the context that families live in, or that the context that children live in. And so part of that contextual element is timing. And so having this impact 5-year-olds versus 10-year-olds versus 15-year-olds, that they're experiencing different things, right? And so I like to think about age differences and their understanding and their capabilities of learning on their own. So that would be a big thing. We've kind of alluded to that. But then I also like to think about how families and society and communities are so different. And so recognizing challenges that families may have, benefits that others may have. I just think it's really important to recognize the uniqueness, that not every student is having the same situation, and that we need to, as educators, as parents, we need to recognize those. And that makes it extra challenging and difficult, but that is what it is to be a parent, and that is what it is to be an educator. So that would be the one thing, but I think we've alluded to it, but maybe I didn't say it directly.
Okay, thanks, Ada.
Yeah.
I would say that I hear a lot that parents are very nervous that their children are going to fall academically behind. But what I'd like to say is that this is a global pandemic and everyone is in the same boat.
Right.
And that nobody's going to be academically behind. We're educators and we will catch children up. Everyone is going to be academically in the same predicament. We're doing the best that we can as educators. We're going to educate your children, whether it is through e-learning or through a hybrid model, or if it's fully face-to-face. So I don't think that anyone has to fear that their child is going to fall academically behind in any of those three contexts. So I think that you should feel fully confident in the value of the education that your child is receiving through whatever form that you choose to educate your child.
Yeah. And if it's you, may the teacher evaluations be good, right? If it's you as a parent. Well, thank you both very much. I appreciate it, and I'm going to wish all the parents and students going into the fall semester some good luck, and I hope that they have people advocating for them as much as you guys are. So thank you very much. I think this is very helpful.